no bad words. So I just wanted to thank some of my friends and welcome everybody from Makee Ailana. I wanted to thank some of the people that helped me with this, and so I definitely got a lot of help from my husband Jim, who always is good. He's great with content support and technical support. And I wanted to thank Doug Kern, because he did a lot of really great, well, he loaned me all his books, and I had some of those books, but he had some I didn't have, so I didn't have to go to the library to take pictures and stuff for my PowerPoint. And he also did some really good research and got me a couple of maps that are very cool that you don't need to see. And and my friend Rolf, who lives at the Waikiki Grand and is the president, he has done a lot of research in the area too, so I talked to him about that. And then of course, there's Dave, who helped me a lot with my technical assistance. Makee Ailana, technical assistance, call him. So I'm gonna stand back here so I can look at my PowerPoint so I know what to say. Okay, I have a great picture of Makee Ailana, you know, our story. Anyway, moving on. So what I'm going to do is a little background to put Waikiki and Makee Ailana into context with Hawaii and our place in Hawaii. So our story starts, the Hawaiian Islands, you know, burst out of the Pacific Ocean in volcanic activity, and we're here for millions and millions of years in total isolation. We're the most isolated place in the entire world, and there was virtually no human contact until just recently. You know, even birds and vegetation were so far, it was very hard. That's, you know, some little birds would be blown over here in a storm or something and end up here, maybe drop a few seeds from their excrement, and plants started, and, you know, driftwood drifted over, and there may have been some insect eggs on it or something. But anyway, it took years and years, forever, for this to become a fertile and inviting environment. But eventually it did. We had some indigenous wildlife, mostly birds, nenes and all the, I can't say the Hawaiian names, but beautiful red and yellow birds that we have on the islands. But then some very adventuresome people from the Makee Islands, which is in French Polynesia, decided to come here one day. And it was probably driven by overpopulation in the Marquesas. They're not very fertile there. And they were so brave. They got in these double-hulled canoes, which look like the Hokulea and Hikiamalea, which are the ones that are recreating Hawaiian canoeing and migration in the Pacific. And actually, one of my friend's daughter is one of the new navigators, and she's going on this next trip that they're starting now. That's going to be 4 years. So the Hawaiians, I mean the people from the Marquesas, and they know that by DNA, that's where they probably originally came from. Packed up birds, dogs, pigs, chickens, you know, taro, red fruit, yes, all kinds of things, and they had to bring enough people to repopulate. So they must have had much more than one boat, although nobody knows how many they brought. And the first migration, they think, might have started about 400 AD. And they sailed by the stars, and they also sailed by the way the wind blew, the way the ocean waves went. They looked at what kind of fish were in the area. All of those things give hints, and also birds, because you're not really going to see very many birds unless you're near landfall. So the first ones came to Hawaii, and most of the archaeologists think that they landed on the Big Island, probably in Ka'u on the southern tip. And but they were adventurous, and they quickly populated all the other islands. And so Oahu, of course, being the best, became the favorite. And so the first Hawaiians came and they settled in Kailua, Waimanalo, and the Kahaluu area, Kaneohe, probably because it's some of the most fertile land on this island. But then they quickly came over the Pali and settled in Waikiki also. The first settlers, they were really industrious. They were great fishermen, great farmers. They fish farmed. They were artisans, and they very quickly became a little too successful. They needed to have a way to transform and to use all the resources from the shore to the mountains. And they had brought their form of government already, which included chiefs and high elite and lower people. And they had no sense of land ownership in those days. Everything was really God's, and then the king was the sovereign who took care of everything, and then he designated to his lower people down. So they developed a land system and governance system that had each island, the king at the top, and then he ruled the whole island, which is called the Moku Puni. And then below that, the Ali'i had different portions called the Moku. And Waikiki, which is what we're talking about, is in the Moku called Kona. And that's because we're on the Kona side of this island. And so but there's also several other apuaha. And the apuaha go from the very top of the mountain, down the valleys to the sea, kind of in a triangle. And so you have all the fish, you have all the lowland things that you can grow, fish farming, you have animals higher up in the mountains, you have different farming and different animals that grow at the different levels, and that way they could all share it. So you had the Moku Puni, which is the highest, the Moku, the Ahu Pua'a, which Waikiki is a part of. And ours runs amazingly from Paoa Valley to Wailupi, the Waikiki one does. It's really very large, and it might be because when about from 1600 at least, the kings of this island, or Mo'i as they're called, lived in Waikiki, and it was basically the capital. And so, so there's several ones, Paoa Valley, there's several apua'a in this one. And then there's a smaller organizational governance area called an ili. And Kakio was an ili, and it is ruled by the families. And Kakio, which I'll talk about later, is where we live. Then in 1778, Captain Cook came to Hawaii. And at first he was welcomed. There was a lot of suspicion, and then eventually they killed him. But the door was open, and his boat went away, came back, and civilization, Western civilization, was on the roll to Hawaii. And there was no stopping it after that. I'm going to talk a little bit about King Kamehameha and then go back to the advent of Western colonization. King Kamehameha was born in 1758, and he was born on the Big Island into a very royal family, and they sort of know what year he was born in, even though they didn't write things down in those days, because there was all these happenings in the sky, all of this light and constellations and all this stuff going on at night. And so in modern times, they ascertained that that was Halley's Comet year. And so the Hawaiians all thought it was really auspicious that he was born in that year. And in fact, there was so much warring factions, they whisked him off and hid him till he was a teenager so that he couldn't be killed before that. Anyway, King Kamehameha grew up into a big, strong, good warrior, and also very intelligent, I'm sure. And so he eventually warred on the Big Island and won all of that over. Then he went over to Maui, conquered Molokai. Then he came back to the Big Island because other people were trying to usurp him there, and he had to come back, probably his brother or his cousin. And so then he was there for a while. And in the meantime, the Westerners had been coming, and they assisted King Kamehameha with Western advisors and with guns and other Western style implements of war. And in 95, he came with thousands of warriors in double-hulled canoes, and with his Western advisors, and landed on our beaches right here, and fought with the local king, who was Kalani Kupuli, and they pushed them back, till they finally were pushed up the Pali in Manoa, on top of the Pali, and then they pushed all of Kalani Kupuli's army off the Pali, except for the few that escaped or ran away. So King Kamehameha became the king of our island, and when he stayed here because after Western contact, Honolulu Harbor was the beacon, and it was a good place, and so most of the trade and other activity that was happening on Oahu. So he moved to Waikiki and set up residence, and most of his elite lived around in Waikiki, all around. Probably from just down here, Pauakalani was a stream, and from down here down to Kalia, where Ilokai is where most of them live. And Waikiki was great. It has beautiful beaches. It had all kinds of resources because it had lots of water coming down the streams. They had lots of food from the ocean, but also there were so many valleys and rich farmlands in the back over here that it was really a great place. And then he moved the capital to Honolulu, where it is now, mainly because of commerce and because that's where everything is happening over there. And we may not know this now, but Waikiki was the boondocks. They really didn't have much mode of transportation except walking. The Westerners did bring some horses, but and it was all mucky and whatever between there and Waikiki. So it was sort of a boondocks, really suburban place. And his descendants remained the Moai, or kings of Hawaii, and they all resided, or at least kept summer residences around here because it was so nice. And then, as all of this is happening, more and more Westerners are coming, bringing their ideas of Western civilization, trade, capitalism, religion, to the islands, and slowly but surely changing the way everything was done. One of the bigger things also was not only the missionaries who came with their religion and reading and writing, but the Westerners also brought horrible diseases. The local people didn't have any immunity at all to Western diseases because they'd never been exposed to anything. And at the time of contact, local historians think that there were between 300,000 and 1 million Hawaiians living on these islands, almost as much as we have now. And within 80 years, there was only 29,000 left. And so that left a lot of opportunity for savvy-minded businessmen to bring in people, to encourage immigration, to set up big plantations, and so all of that happened. In addition, because of the missionaries, they started forcing the Hawaiians to wear clothing because they mostly didn't wear very much, so they all wore. I was going to wear my muumuu today, and I forgot. I have several nice Mother Hubbard muumuus that cover you all up. So there was a lot going on, and then in 1848, Liho was the king. He was Kamehameha III, and he was a pretty savvy businessman himself. The royalty was pretty westernized by then, and he was getting a lot of pressure from the Westerners to privatize land, because at that point still nobody owned anything. God owned everything, and the king was the sovereign that looked over everything, and was the caretaker along allegedly with his elite. And he was getting a lot of pressure from the businessmen, and he was getting really worried about the number of foreigners that were here, and he wanted to maintain a hold on his properties, which he considered his because he is the sovereign of everything. And he was getting pressure from the foreign businessmen to allow private property ownership so they wouldn't have to lease their properties, so they could own them and do whatever. So, and then he was worried about his local people. He was afraid that they would be all pushed off the land by everybody else. So I think he did have some real altruistic reasons about what he was about to do. And that was, he wanted to, keep some of the land for himself, keep some of the land for his elite, and he wanted to share the land with some of the Makee Ailana, which were the local people, the Kanakas that worked on the land and everything. And so he decided to do something that's called the Great Mahele.